Hello, Tony. Welcome in, my friend. Welcome in, everybody, to the Soul Group meeting. Hope everyone is doing well. It's been a while since I've been able to go live. I've missed you guys. Hello, Noel El Leon. Good to see you, my friend. Welcome in, everybody. I've had a little bit of a rough several days in a row, which is why you guys have not seen me. But I am back. You're most welcome, Cannibal Slayer. Thank you for that. And thank you for coming back. So, I have something I want to, a specific topic I want to discuss with you guys tonight. This is going to be slightly different than what it usually is. But it's not entirely off topic because most of you guys know that my personal motto is think for yourself, question authority. It has been for a very long time, and there's an important reason why that statement means so much to me. And really, I owe the majority of the reason behind that to one professor that I had in college so many moons ago. And I wanted to share a little bit of that experience with you guys. So I want to talk on the topic of critical thinking. And I know a lot of people are probably like, oh, yay, my favorite. Just try to contain your excitement, right? There's a reason why I want to talk about critical thinking. And I'll get to that. Hello, Brock. Good to see you. Hello, Cheryl. So, think for yourself, question authority started for me personally. I don't remember exactly how long ago it was, something like 14 years ago, something along those lines. I had a professor in college, and although I had probably 6 altogether professors that were just above and beyond everyone else. I mean, I loved their teaching style, the information they shared. They really opened the world up to me. But there was one, Nikki, I think you're going to love this conversation, my friend. We're talking about critical thinking. So I had one professor who was actually a geography professor. He also taught geology, which is a little odd. But he, more than any other professor that I had the entire time I was in college, peeled back the wool from my eyes and caused me to start asking questions about the accepted reality that I had been brought up under. Because he recognized that what people are taught in school, first of all, what we believe is the official narrative, the official story of everything, is not always exactly the truth. That oftentimes history is edited by the victors, that things change. And thank you, Brock. I appreciate that. There's a lot of things that are kept out of the public eye, and the vast majority of the population is not aware of. And again, he was teaching geography, but he never missed an opportunity to plant a seed that would cause people to start asking questions. And I want to give you a quick example of this. We were talking about basically imperialism and how the United States is not immune to that, and how we have over 200 military bases spread out all over the entire planet, going to push democracy because that's what's fair and just, right? The world needs democracy. And one of the students was talking about, well, what's so wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with democracy. It's the best system of government, and yada, 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 right? Because that's what you're supposed to say. And somehow we got on the topic and conversation of, you might just be surprised at some of the things that your government has done, such as the bombing of factories that only make baby formula in the Middle East. Why in the world would our government do that? Almost nobody that was in the class had ever heard that our government actually did something like that. And so, of course, it was shocking, because they don't teach you that in school. It's not on the front page of the newspapers, and it's certainly not blasted all over the mainstream news, right? We don't talk about stuff like that. Or how whenever we were first exploring the newfound power of the nuclear bomb, and the U.S. government wanted to know the varying effects of radiation exposure, we didn't build an apparatus to test that. We sent U.S. servicemen out into the field, and we detonated a nuclear bomb. And then we had waves of soldiers at different variations of distance with a badge on their chest, which was essentially a Geiger counter to measure how much radiation they had been exposed to. And the soldiers were told, don't worry, this badge will protect you. It will absorb the radiation. The truth was, we just wanted to see how much they had been exposed to, and what the effects would be on the human body. But these were our own soldiers, U.S. servicemen, citizens. Of course, this was a long time ago, nearly 100 years ago at this point. But the point is, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that people don't hear about, and it's for a reason. And this isn't the exact topic that I want to talk about with you guys today. I want to talk about thinking critically and why that is so important. That professor started that line of reasoning for me by causing me to question my own reality. This facade that everybody participates in, and very few are even aware that it is a facade. Give me a second, guys. You might have to bear with me a little bit. I'm on the tail end of a cold, so I got a lot of congestion going on tonight, but hopefully it'll be okay. So, thinking critically is paramount. And if you want to hear something that's even perhaps more terrifying than that information I just shared with you guys, there has been research into the human capacity for critical thinking. And some of you guys might be familiar with this study or might have heard this. Hello, Starseed. But it has been discovered that less than 30% of the human population has the capacity to think critically. Less than 30%. And they think the true number is actually somewhere around 25%. That should terrify each and every one of us. It should definitely give us pause to think the ability to take in information, to vet sources of information for bias, even that which goes against our own paradigm, ignore cognitive dissonance, and then form our own conclusions based on information. The fact that that is a trait shared by less than 30% of the population is downright scary to me. It absolutely is. And I want to give you guys some examples of this. This is the overall conversation I want to have. But before I really go into this, I want to illustrate why this is so important and why I'm talking about this now, especially on a spirituality channel, right? What in the world does critical thinking have to do with spirituality? everything, my friends, everything. But right now truly is a pivotal moment in human history. Most of you guys who are familiar with my channel know why and why I believe that. Because we are at the end of an age, and we are ushering in the dawn of the new age, the golden age. And the old way of doing things is on its way out. We are in the process of establishing the new ways of doing things. But as with most transitions, this is very much like a tower moment. Most of you guys who are familiar with the tarot know what I mean by a tower moment. The old establishment has been in power for a very long time and don't want to relinquish that power. And those systems of control of the old age are in their death throes. And so it appears that our world right now is becoming more and more polarized with each and every day. So the big picture for me is this is where we're at. We're at this period of time where we are evolving, and the old age is falling away, the new age is being birthed, and it's important that we do that the right way. So that's the big picture. For me, and this might sound odd, the small picture is the fact that I think most of us here are somewhere in the United States, and we are less than a month away from a presidential election right now. At a completely different time, right? Look at what's been going on in the world for the last 5 years, 10 years. Hey, Tweety, good to see you, my friend. Things have been rocky and rough for several years now, and they don't show any signs of slowing. I personally believe that every single bit of it, whether you're talking about the earth changes, the climate changes, the weather patterns, or the dichotomy between accepted ways of living and belief systems, from the economy to international politics, every single bit of that is related to this cycle ending and the beginning of a new cycle, because it's all on its way out and we're birthing a new earth into existence. But the main reason why I'm bringing this topic for tonight's conversation with you guys is because right now every single one of us is being manipulated. Every single one of us. Every single one of us is standing before this giant tsunami of information from millions of different sources, at least thousands of different sources. It's everywhere. Even if you avoid television like the plague, you don't own one, you don't go near anyone, you're staring at my face on some sort of screen. There is innumerable platforms that all work towards the same goal ultimately, and that is to flood us with information, with opinions, with bias, with propaganda, with all sorts of junk and garbage. And we're doing the best we can to tread water. And it's all in an attempt, in my personal opinion, if you boil all of this down, if you can see through the two-party political system in the United States, if you can see through revisionist history, if you can see through the propaganda machine and all of the garbage, and you boil it down to its essence, to its root, it's all a tactic of division, right? To keep us in a perpetual state of chaos, because if you are in a perpetual state of chaos, you cannot think critically, which takes us out of our power. So to me, the ultimate weapon, faculty that we can develop and embrace is the ability to think critically. And an important aspect of that thinking critically for me isn't pure logic. It is the utilization of both the logic and our spiritual discernment and our intuition, being able to combine both of those together and form our conclusions. I like to try to form a conclusion based on logic and then use my intuition or my spiritual discernment for confirmation or guidance. Ultimately, I think as long as we're using both, then we're probably doing a lot better than the masses, I will say. Okay, so that's the reason why I want to talk to you guys about this now. So I want to really dig into the meat and potatoes of this just a little bit, because this is an all important topic, even though it's not glamorous. It doesn't have sex appeal, it doesn't have all the bells and whistles on it, but this is very important. So some of you guys know that in college I studied primarily religious studies and psychology. And I absolutely loved. I loved every bit of that, because I am a seeker of truth and I love getting information. But one of the things that really blew me away about psychology is how truly easy it is to manipulate the minds of people. It scared me, and of course, like most people, I wanted to think, oh, it's not that easy. Sure it is for some people, but not me. I'm different, right? I'm above that. I cannot be that easy to manipulate. Everybody wants to believe that. Hello, Songbird. Yeah, I seen that, Brock. Anytime I even utter the word politics, they immediately attach it there. But that's fine. So here's a story I want to share with you guys. Anyone that's familiar with psychology is probably familiar with this story. There is this idea that is foundational to psychology and the way that consciousness works, that is known as classical conditioning. This was really flushed out by a scientist named Pavlov. Pavlov's dogs. A lot of people are familiar with that story, right? The story goes something like this: that this psychologist slash scientist took some dogs and he wanted to study how they work, how their minds work. And he figured out that if he rang a bell at feeding time or immediately before he fed the dogs, eventually their minds would be conditioned to expect food when they heard that bell. And sure enough, he found out that even without the presence of food, if he was to ring the bell, they would start salivating like crazy. They knew, ooh, this means I'm getting food. And he wound up proving that you can condition a response out of people. This probably sounds like it's not that big of a deal, but the more you learn about psychology, the more you understand how big of a deal that is. That means if you do something enough times with enough repetition in the right way, you can control people's behavior. You can control their emotional state. You can control their biological response to outside stimulus using classical conditioning. So, yeah, exactly. He was basically the father of cognitive behavior, cognitive behavioral therapy. The main reason I'm sharing this with you is that did not happen. How many of you have heard that story before about Pavlov's dogs? About him ringing the bell and training them that when the bell rings, it's time to eat, and they start salivating. I'm sure I'm not the first person to have heard that story. If you've taken psychology at all, you've heard that story. The truth is, that's not how it happened at all. The truth is a little bit darker than that. There was no bell, first of all, no bell at all. And that's what is craziest about that is the bell is the thing that is most associated with Pavlov and his dogs. But he never used a bell. He actually used a metronome. And the idea that we're told if you go to college even and study, major in psychology like I did, they tell you that story. He did not use a bell. He used a metronome. And he didn't just ring the bell or set off the metronome and wait for them to start salivating. He actually cut a hole in their throat and removed the esophagus. And when they did eat, the food would just fall out and never went into their stomach. And that's how they were able to collect the saliva and stomach acid. Yes, I'm serious. I don't want to tell you all the details because it's sickening, the things that they really did. But the point is that I'm trying to make here is millions of people have been fed this story in educational settings where you're supposed to receive the truth. And especially on a topic such as psychology, whenever every single little detail of that story is critical in order to understand the way psychology works. The truth is, those dogs were not eating. They thought that they were eating, and it was just falling out of their neck. And I apologize for the imagery there. I know that that's grotesque, but I'm trying to make a point with that. I myself was told that, and I believe that. Why would I have any reason to question it, right? I am presented these facts by an authority, somebody who's dedicated their entire life to studying psychology. Why would I have any reason to question what they're telling me? What did I just hear come again? Serious. And I challenge you guys. I'm going to pause here for just a second and repeat my motto. Think for yourself, question authority. If this is your first time coming across my live, anything you hear me say, please don't just take it, run with it, and say, this is the truth. I don't want that from anybody. I'm here to challenge people to think for themselves, not to tell people what to think. So this, as with everything else, I encourage you to go look into it yourself and do your own research so that you don't have to accept what I'm telling you as the truth. You can come to your own conclusion. That is the topic of tonight. That's why we're having this conversation. What was the purpose of the hole in the throat? It was to have a more strict scientific control over the situation, allegedly. The truth is that's not all. They also had a hole leading to the stomach, and that's how they were actually fed. They would just place food directly in the stomach so they didn't starve to death. And also so that they could measure and collect gastric acids. And as if that's not grotesque enough, he actually harvested the saliva from these dogs and sold it to other companies, and profited quite a bit of money off keeping these dogs alive and causing them to salivate, for his psychological research. You can get the idea of why that story isn't told when you go to psychology class, right? The nice, cute little bell is a little bit more easy to swallow. And I use this story, regardless of the graphic imagery, to hammer my point home. If we don't stop and question, especially authority, and think critically about stuff, if we just hear something and say, oh, this must be the truth because this authority told me it is the truth, then we are being manipulated 100%. And if you know anything about psychology, you know how easy it is to manipulate the mind of a human being. It's very simple. Let me try to catch back up on my comments real quick. I've seen that, Brock. It's a little disturbing. How long did they live for? Not very long. It depended on the dog, but most of them were dead within 10 days, sadly. Where did I learn this? I actually, I don't remember the name of a channel. I seen another creator talking about this, and I said, BS, and I had to go and dig and do my own research, which is what I usually do whenever I hear something, especially when I see it on the internet. And lo and behold, that's the actual story behind it. And for whatever reason, we decided to leave all of that out of the textbooks whenever we're training people in psychology as a profession. This is not in a children's bedtime story, right? Where it would make sense to completely alter the entire basis of this research, right? Because you don't want to scar and cause trauma to children. But to adults who are studying psychology as a profession, I don't see the value in completely altering how that research was carried out, the method in which the data was gathered, any of that. It just does not make sense to me. Just, they asked you if you thought this live was appropriate for TikTok. I hope you said yes. Just never thought I'd hear this. Yeah. I have came across so many instances just like this that they're just mind-blowing, and it really makes you wonder, how much have I personally accepted as the truth? And it is one of those pieces that I have put together to build this idea of what ultimate truth and reality is to me, because we all do that. That's the way the mind works. How much of that have we accepted as truth without looking any further, simply because an authority figure said so? Yes, Kramerly, it was a metronome. Brock, you talking to me? I think you misunderstood my reaction. I know what you're talking about with the cows and the holes in their stomach. I've seen it. It's disturbing. Okay. So I want to move on with this conversation here. I just wanted to catch up. I wanted to catch up on this, on the comments, before I get completely buried. And bear with me, guys. I'm sorry I get a lot of comments tonight, and I'm not able to keep up with everyone. Okay. So this isn't a talk purely about psychology, but since we're on this topic, with critical thinking, one of the biggest foundations of thinking critically is understanding the way that deductive reasoning works, and the way that, as an example, it is physically impossible for the human being to make a decision completely divorced from all emotion. That's just not the way our brain works. You physically cannot make a decision without engaging the emotional centers of the brain. You have to engage that emotional center. Brandy, try to remind me after I finish this, and I'll answer your question. Emotions are important, right? They're there for a reason. But unfortunately, one of the realities of the way our brain is structured evolutionary is our brains are lazy. That's just the way it is for humanity. Our brains are lazy. They're very efficient. They're always looking for the quickest, easiest way to get from point A to point Z, with the least amount of calories burned, with the least amount of resistance. How do we get from where we're at to where we want to be? The brain is very efficient. It's always looking for the path of least resistance, and that's why it likes making emotional decisions, because we tend to skip over all of the hurdles, all of the problems of logic, and engage with the emotional center of our brain and jump to the conclusion and accept that as truth, because it's the easiest thing to do. It's the easiest way to get us from where we're at to where we want to be. That idea, in conjunction with what we found out about how we perceive authority, should be enough for, in my opinion, okay, I'm spitting out shoulds here, so this is according to me. Those two things in conjunction should be enough for everybody to want to seriously work on developing critical thinking as much as possible. And I want to go back to the other story real quick about what we know about authority figures. Have you guys heard of the Milgram shock experiments? I'm sorry, I think I messed that up. There's two main studies there, and I always mix them up. There's the Stanford prison experiment, and then the shock experiments. I won't go over all those details right now. The important thing is, this was studied in the 1970s, and they made an attempt to repeat the experiment before we decided that it was unethical to continue doing these kind of experiments. They said it was unethical. But basically they took a bunch of kids they were on college campuses, and said, hey, would you like to make a couple $100? And the ones that agreed, they were divided into two groups, and then led into this underground, basically a dormitory. And one group was told, hey, you're prison guards, hey, you're prisoners. And then they were put in there. And the guards, the ones that were the guards, they were given no instructions whatsoever, and immediately they became very aggressive and very abusive to their charges. And they had to stop the experiment very, very early on because it became so violent. People were getting hurt. That's what authority does to people. There is a part of our brain that is triggered, and especially when you have a group of people, not just one. That is not a universal constant, right? That is just a window into human nature. Give me just a second here. Bear with me, guys. Do I still visit my Amish family? What do you mean visit? Okay. So the other one, the shock experiments, is what is even more eye-opening. Basically, there was two different groups, once again, and one of them was in on the experiment. They were told what was going to happen, that they would be put in a room, hooked up to this machine, and they would pretend to receive electric shocks. The other group had no idea what was going on. They were led into a room with a control panel, and they were given instructions by a scientist, holding this clipboard, reading off the instructions, and they said, you will see this participant through the glass, and you are to read off a question one at a time to them. If they answer incorrectly, you are to flip this switch over here and administer an electric shock to them. Every time they give a wrong answer, turn the dial up another degree. Where it's at right now, it's a really mild shock. You barely will even notice it. About halfway up, it's going to become pretty painful. 7's about unbearable pain, and if you were to go all the way, it would kill them. It would take their life. So they would go on reading the questions, and then when they answered wrong, they would flip the switch, and the person on the other side of the glass would scream. Of course, they thought they were actually getting shocked. It got so bad to the point that they were almost all the way up, and they would say, go ahead and turn the dial all the way up. And the people would turn around and look at the scientists and say, are you sure? But you said that would kill them. And then they were told, follow the instructions. They answered incorrectly, flip the switch. Almost every single one of the people flip the switch, even though they knew that it would kill the person on the other side of that glass. I don't remember the exact statistics, but it was over 90% of the people flipped that switch thinking that they were killing the person on the other side of the glass. And they did this with hundreds of people, right? This wasn't a one-off, just a small study. And what they concluded, because they did several variations of this experiment, was it was because of the perceived authority. In different variations, the person, the scientist reading off the instructions, changed something. In one study, they took off the white lab coat. The number of people who were willing to flip that switch dropped dramatically because they took off the white lab coat. And then if they dropped the clipboard, it went down even more. They perceived that person as having authority, so they were willing to do it anyway. That means if there was a person giving them instructions with perceived authority, it overrided their reasoning, and they were willing to do something that was against their moral belief, because they perceived someone as an authority figure saying, do this. Every single person that participated was interviewed after this, and almost every single one of them was asked, why would you do that? Why would you flip that switch knowing that this would kill this person? And they all said, well, I was being told to by this authority figure, and I assumed they knew what they were doing, right? It's not my responsibility. I'm not in charge. I'm just a participant. That's how the Holocaust happened. That's what happened in Nazi Germany. The perception of authority to overpower reason. That's why I say think for yourself, question authority. It is absolutely critical that we develop the capacity to do that. That should terrify every single one of you guys, if you're really hearing what I'm saying. Especially now that we know less than 30% of the population has the capacity to think critically. The problem is, first of all, we're not taught to think critically, especially in the United States. We have an education system, right? But our education system wasn't designed to truly produce educated citizens. It was designed to produce better factory workers. It was not designed to teach us how to think. It was designed to teach us what to think. And those are very different places to come from. I did not, Brock. I'm sorry. I've been dealing with this cold and all kinds of other stuff going on in my life. I haven't had time to do much of anything. The education system is definitely part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the fact that, thank you for that, my friend, it takes more work to think critically. It is so much easier to turn on the TV and be told what to think, or to scroll through social media and accept what somebody is telling you as the truth. It doesn't have to be something big. Easy, simple things like, let's just take one point, and I don't want to go too deep into this because it will derail the whole conversation. But I'm sure several of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about here. Let's say you open Instagram or something, and you're scrolling along and you see a video where somebody's saying, the government's using HARP, and it's what has generated this terrible catastrophe and directed it to this specific area to wipe out this entire town because of lithium mining. Some of you have probably heard that. The difference between the vast majority of the population and what I'm saying is, instead of just hearing that and saying, oh my gosh, I wonder if that's true, or oh my God, that's why, which was much worse, instead of that, say, I really wonder if there's any truth to that. I want to look into this. That requires you dropping everything you're doing, and doing some research, finding various different sources, and then vetting those sources, seeing where they got their information, seeing if there's any conflict of interest. Where are they getting their funding? Why are they saying these things? Is there any evidence to support them? That takes a lot of work, and most people are not prepared to invest that much energy in critical thinking. I experienced all of the energy you described. I read about HARP and CERN. So, yes, I do post these lives on my YouTube channel, my friend. There is a link in my bio that will take you to that, or you can go to my website, magirising.com. There's also a link for the YouTube channel. Thank you, Brock. So, I'm not telling you guys I believe that to be the truth, or I believe it to be untrue. I'm saying I'm using that as an example because it's a real world example. And this is exactly why I'm talking right now about critical thinking. Because in the age of information, ignorance is a choice, right? People like to throw that around out there. Never before in the history of humanity have we been able to access information in a split second from the other side of the planet instantaneously from hundreds of different sources. That is true. But here's the thing. At the same time, sure, we have access to incredible volumes of information. But the downside to that is we have access to incredible amounts of information. And very little, if any of it, is vetted. It doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't have to have even a grain of factual evidence to support it. All it has to do is have somebody speak it on the internet, and then it's pumped out into the masses by these algorithms, and then people just latch onto it, right? And so, yes, in the age of information, ignorance might be a choice, but getting at the actual truth is worse than searching for a needle in the haystack, because we are being bombarded. Talking about taking a drink from the fire hydrant, we are being bombarded 24/7 by tsunamis of information from every possible source, and some of it's true. The vast majority of it is not. Even that is based on truth has been twisted and distorted through this propaganda machine and designed to manipulate you and sway you in a certain direction, one direction or the other. And that's a scary thing to consider. That's even the stuff that's based on factual information. We are truly treading water right now. And in this day and age, more than ever, we need people to stand up and be the voice of reason. That's what we need. We need people to stand up and question authority, to question the BS that is force-fed down people's throats, to question authority, to think critically for themselves, and to help other people learn how to do those things. Only 1% will. The truth is that might even be best case scenario. I hope that's not the truth. Star Muse, that's where I'm going with this. That is one of the important reasons why I'm having this conversation about critical thinking. Before I go to the topic of politics and what's going on in the world right now, I want to share a little bit of information for you guys. This idea is the number one way. It is one of the number one tools of the CIA to manipulate and control populations. And I'm not claiming that they would ever do anything like this to the American population. I'm just saying I've heard talks given by ex-CIA officers, and this is their number one tactic. They will assault the minds of people with a barrage of information, a torrent of information, because they've discovered in the age of the internet, information spreads so quickly it cannot be controlled. There was a day and age whenever if a key bit of information was leaked through a newspaper, they could control that, right? But then the internet boomed. Now everybody's connected to a device 24/7. Once it's uploaded, there's no controlling it. So they no longer try to control that. Instead, what they do is they use volume of information and velocity of information. What I mean by that is, let's go back to the disaster in Appalachia as an example. The truth is in there somewhere, right? As to what happened and why it happened. There is a barrage of information through all sources, through the mass media, on social media, on podcast, on radio, everywhere you look, millions of people talking about it at the same time. So there's the volume of information, right? And in the middle of all of that, somewhere is the truth. And then there's the velocity. What I mean by that is the rate at which information is thrown at you. Think back of the last 10 years. How many times did you feel just completely overwhelmed and inundated by information, by stories, by this, oh my gosh, this thing happened that should have been like, the whole world should have screeched to a halt and been like, oh my gosh, this just happened. But 12 hours later, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. That's velocity and volume. That's how they do this. By just throwing so much out there so quickly, you don't have the ability to critically think, to take one thing and say, okay, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. That takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of dedication and energy. How can you do that? If you are being bombarded by so much so quickly, even if you still do, you're going to miss an awful lot because you've dedicated so many resources to getting to the truth on one topic. So that is their main tool, to sow seeds of chaos into the world. And it is a very fantastically powerful tool. And we see that every single day. Most people are not aware that is being used against them, unfortunately. I love that movie, Brock. I love that movie. So the main reason that I want to have this conversation with everybody is we are less than a month away from having this election and a person being chosen to be the next president of the United States. If you take everything that I told you guys and think about what's going on in the world, it's pretty obvious. Both sides use every single one of those tactics and much more to sway people to their cause. That is what it means to be a politician. If a politician is somebody who uses psychology and manipulation and rhetoric to sway people's minds to their cause to get votes. That is the entire goal of politics. And I know there are true, big-hearted people in politics out there who are incredibly benevolent and they want all of the best for people. Okay, so I'm not saying every single politician is inherently evil or nefarious or anything like that. The point I'm trying to make is, in order to make it in politics, you have to engage in manipulation. You have to engage in all of these deceptive practices that I've been talking about. And it is absolutely everywhere. I agree with you, Brandy, 100%. It is very unfair. But it is the reality that we are faced with. But there is one tool in our toolbox that I've already mentioned, and I'm sure most of you guys know what I'm talking about, that can overrule these tools of volume and velocity to dilute the truth to the point that it loses its value. And that is discernment. Using spiritual discernment cuts through all of that and gets right to the heart of the issue. Then you can work backwards using deductive reasoning and logic to arrive at that point of conclusion. But it's through engaging with our spiritual discernment that we're able to wade through all of that BS and get at that nugget of truth. That gives us the ability to distill down all of the BS, all of the garbage that's out there. Okay, so now I actually want to talk a little bit about politics. Something I never thought I would say. The truth is very buried, Cynthia. Absolutely. So, if you are on social media, which I'm willing to bet every single one of you are, as we are on a social media platform right now, you are being manipulated. That is the cold, hard facts. And every single one of you guys should already know that and have already accepted it. But in case you have not, I want to talk about that and spread some awareness on how that works. There are hundreds of different ways that they manipulate our consciousness using social media. This is just one of the ways, one of the tools, right? It's not just social media. So don't mistake me. Mainstream media is worse. It's absolutely worse. But I'm focusing in on social media for a reason. The reason is most of us, not all of us, but most of us have recognized mainstream media for what it is. We've seen the wolf behind the sheep's clothing, and we've said, I've had enough of that, and we've turned off the TV. We've distanced ourselves from the mainstream news, from all these major networks, and from the propaganda that they spew. Not everyone, but the majority of us have. We've recognized that for what it is. But we've welcomed social media into our house to fill that void. That is where most of us are at. And I think a lot of the time that is done erroneously. We believe that it is safer because it is perceived to be this grassroots type of thing, where it is we the people as opposed to our corporate overlords of the mainstream. And to a degree, there probably is a little bit of truth in that. But that has been recognized by more than just myself, right? This is why TikTok has been under attack by the United States government. It's because they understand that this is the way our society has shifted. So many people have went to social media. In order to get to us, they need to own social media. They need to be able to control its algorithm. They need to be able to manipulate it, just like they do with Facebook and Instagram and all of the other ones, right? And I want to give you guys some real world examples of this. This is stuff that should be public knowledge, but it is not. A lot of us are aware of it, but it's not actually public knowledge. Here's a perfect example of this. Every social media platform uses an algorithm to populate information displayed on your screen, whatever it is, on your feed, whatever. If you're talking about YouTube, then it's videos. If you're talking about TikTok, it's shorter videos. If you're talking about Facebook, it's a combination of different stuff. But They all use an algorithm to populate that information specifically tailored to you on your feed. That's what makes it so rewarding psychologically. That's what gives us the dopamine hits. It's because it's specifically tailored to us using the algorithm, right? It knows what you like, it knows what you don't like. You don't even have to tell it. It just knows this because it records how long your eyes look at certain things and how quickly you scroll past other things. And every time you scroll, you're training the algorithm. The more time you spend interacting with certain things, certain topics, the more you're teaching it. The quicker you scroll past some things, especially if you were to mute or block or hide or report, you're training that algorithm. And that sounds like a beautiful thing. And I'm not saying that it's nefarious or anything, but it's important to understand how this process works. Over time, we are, through using that process of discrimination, we are training the algorithm to show us only that which we like and not show us that which we don't like. And so every social media network or platform knows whether you lean left or whether you lean right. You don't have to answer a questionnaire. It knows that. Even if you don't know that about yourself, it knows that. And it will specifically tailor what is put on your feed based on your political leanings. And what's awesome about that is it does the same thing for everybody. And one of the beautiful things about the United States as a country, we have a two-party political system. And we have this magical ability, and have had for decades as a nation, to be split nearly perfectly 50-50, right down the middle on matters of ideology. Excuse me, guys. Right down the middle, pretty much 50-50. So in a family, say there's two children in the family that grow up to be siblings. You might have one that leans right and one that leans left. That's actually incredibly common. And guess what happens? They're on the same Facebook. You think they see the same stuff posted? Of course they don't. What if you're looking at the same story? I'm just going to use myself and my brother as an example. This is not a real example. This is make-believe. But let's just say I've trained my algorithm to believe I lean left. My brother has trained his algorithm to believe he leans right. We're both on Facebook or whatever, and our feed is exploding with stories and reports and videos and posts about what's going on in Appalachia because of this storm. You think we're going to see the same information? No, we're not going to see the same information. And what happens is that algorithm that is designed to drive clicks and wired to release dopamine in your brain so that you become more and more addicted to it and you spend more and more time on it. Through that process of trying to keep you happy and showing you what you want to see but not showing you what you don't want to see, it begins to specifically tailor all of that information in a certain slant. So you're not seeing a true, accurate depiction of reality anymore. And so I start seeing, and again, we're looking at the same stories, but they're slanted in a certain way. So I'm seeing this information about this story going on in Appalachia saying, we're doing everything that we can. FEMA's been on the ground. We've got boots on the ground. We've given away millions and millions of dollars. We're saving everybody. Everything's going great. And then my brother doesn't see those stories. He sees, oh my God, they're not helping us. Nobody's coming to save us. They're kicking people out who are trying to come in and save everybody. They're blocking the roads, and they're shutting down all of the interstates and grounding all air traffic. And so what do you think happens? Then me and my brother have a conversation. And I just don't understand how he could see the same information as me and come off as so unhinged. Where would he get all of this garbage, all of this misinformation? The truth is, we're both being pumped full of misinformation. We're both being manipulated. We're both being deceived. The truth isn't over here, and the truth isn't over here. It's somewhere in the middle. You got to sift through all of the garbage. You got to distill it down and get to the truth. That is a very realistic scenario that I'm using as an example. It happens every single day. It's happening right now. And you guys can see this in real time. And I challenge you to play with this and look at it if you've not seen it. Exactly, April Mama. That's exactly what it's designed to do. They're sowing seeds of chaos to increase divisiveness and keep us all running around like chickens with their head cut off and fighting amongst each other. Why? Why would they want that? It's a pretty simple question to answer, really. Joy says, I see way more manipulation coming from one side than the other. Everybody sees it that way. That's the problem. And I challenge you. I challenge not just you particularly, but every single one of you guys. If you have a social media account, let's say that you have Facebook. Start a new Facebook. And go out and add all the conservative posts or groups that you can possibly find. You know, add Fox News, add all of the right-wing pundits, go and like their content, interact with it, but then go do the same thing to the left. Or do two separate accounts. Your mind will be blown at the differences in the information that is being fed to you. What I do with my account is I like them both. If I spend 10 minutes interacting with a left group on my feed, then I'm going to go spend 10 minutes or so on the right. And it completely throws off the algorithm and they have no idea. The whole point of having this conversation is exactly Madam Top Cat. That's exactly what I'm talking about right there. In order to be able to think critically, you have to look at what you like and what you don't like, not just what you like, because then you're being manipulated. You have to look at the whole picture. You have to be able to see things from all sides and then gather that information from various sources, not just the ones you like, vet those sources, take those data points, and using deductive reasoning, arrive at your own conclusion. That only works if you're taking information from various perspectives, not just from one side. And that's the problem. And that's why almost every single person, and it does not matter if you're talking about I'm on the right or I'm on the left, it don't matter. Almost every single person would say it seems an awful lot like one side's doing a lot more manipulation and misinformation than the other side. I'm here to tell you, if you can observe from a helicopter view and detach yourself from the dichotomy of left-right politics, of the two-party political system, you will see left-wing, right-wing, same damn bird. They are both engaging in manipulation. They are both engaging in misinformation. They are both trying to control and manipulate the population. That is the basis of politics, right? I'm not taking either side here. I'm not. Because I don't buy into left-right politics. But here's the problem right now. Both sides are screaming from the mountaintop right now. If we don't get elected, this is the end of the United States. If Donald Trump gets elected, we're going to World War III. If Kamala Harris gets elected, we're going to World War III. And everything in between. If they don't win, if they don't get elected, If you don't vote for them, it's the end of the world. That is a serious problem, considering the fact that we've already learned less than 30% of the population has the capacity to think critically. That's a dangerous, dangerous situation. They're basically throwing gasoline on a fire whenever they do stuff like that. So, anyway, I know this is a little bit different conversation than what I have with you guys. Here's the thing. I am dedicated to the truth with you guys. I am dedicated to the truth with myself. I am first and foremost a seeker of truth. And so I understand that by sharing this information and my opinion with you guys, I might ruffle some feathers. And I'm okay with that. Maybe some feathers need to be ruffled. And I'm all right with doing that because it needs to be done. And here is, thank you for that, Cannibal Slayer. And I agree, it is hugely powerful. But what are you saying? Don't vote. Before I change the subject, let's talk about that, because that is a really good question, my friend. That is a really good question. For anybody who's not familiar with my content, let me start by saying this. I believe we are at the end of the great age, and we stand on the precipice of the new age right now. The old systems of control that have been in place, some of them for thousands of years, are on their way out right now. That's why everything seems so crazy right now. Everywhere you look, I believe that. Our two-party political system, in everything about the system, and whenever I say our system, I'm primarily talking about the United States, because that's where I'm at, that's where most of you guys are at. Every single bit of that, to me, is built on a very flawed foundation, and it is not something that can be fixed. I don't care what president gets elected. I don't care if you elect the Dalai Lama. The central tenet, the central pillar of our system is capitalism. And every time I say this, I know this comes off as me sounding like I am completely against capitalism, and I might even be mistaken as a communist. That's not what